all the producers, everyone who's producing and writing the show is in the room. And that was part of the early ideas that, okay, you know what, you don't need me to be sitting there for another 10 minutes telling stories. I do that all morning on Morning Edition. Let's get everybody in here and throw all the microphones on. And we'll talk about what we're doing. The coffee is literally brewing over in the corner. We're getting our stuff lined up to go on the air, and we throw the microphones on before anybody else gets to jump ahead of us. And that's been neat. It gives us direction. It gives us, I think, a sense of camaraderie, and it just makes the whole morning better. It makes Morning Edition better.
Yeah. It's like our favorite time of the day.
Can you imagine how sick that is?
And then we have a great show after that we really do enjoy, but we have so much fun.
Early Edition started right before the Winter Olympics, and we had an obsession with curling. I don't know what it is, but I can watch curling all day, even more than court shows, and don't get me started on court shows. So the Americans were doing a lot of screaming. I mean, they were yelling, you know, they yell the commands, and we were compelled by this. So we would play cuts of them every morning from the night before, screaming and frequently winning. And this got to be such an obsession that we ended up with the team captain on Early Edition. He was the first guest we ever had on Early Edition, the captain of the U.S. curling team, and he had no idea what we were talking about or why he was on the air.
Or why we cared.
But it sure made us smile.
The hardest part about programming for Early Edition is the fact that it is at 4:50 in the morning. So starting at about 2 o'clock in the morning, following the night before, kind of looking for stuff, is when Joe and I will just start looking around for what we're going to talk about. And so many people aren't up yet, and you have to kind of figure out what did people hear last night that is news to us, but they may have heard it at 8 or 9 o'clock last night. So I think the hardest part is sort of understanding what is going to be something that's big for the rest of the day before anybody else has gotten up or even figured out what the day is going to be.
You know, it's funny because Early Edition is followed by a newscast. So one of the few points of direction we had when we started this was don't do a newscast.
Right.
So it's an interesting balance of informing people without completely being redundant, and it's created its own kind of space on the station and on Facebook Live where we use a lot of audio, we do a lot of storytelling, we really try to get into people's neighborhoods, we talk about our drive to work. You know, we're here living in the same city as our listeners and viewers. We drive the same roads in. We have a lot of shared experiences, actually. And we know whether it's Durgan Park closing down or the government closing down, we're all going through this together. And I think Early Edition has really, with its interactive nature, been able to make that a reality here.
We'll send stories or things that we see to each other, and sometimes we have to note, oh, that's just something I thought you'd like, or that's something for Early Edition.
That's true.
But a lot of the times they overlap, because what we say for Early Edition are not always the things that we would cover in a newscast. For instance, one morning I was driving in, and I come down Sturrow Drive when I come in, and I noticed like the painted lines on the road were different. And I think I mentioned it.
It's like, hey, this might be a story.
Well, it was sort of like, this is the drive in, and then it turned into this big thing because everybody had heart failure over the fact that lines were shifted on Sturrow Drive.
It's the only thing people talked about for the next week. And, and because, like I said, we drive the same roads that everyone else does, we happen to know about it and get ahead of it, right?
Yeah. We drive in at 3:30 a.m., and there are definitely cars on the road.
Here at WGBH, we can see the Mass Pike. You know, you can almost see it from here. And by about 4:30, there's a lot of headlights. TV stations are coming on with their early newscasts at 4:30 a.m. now, which is painful to think about. But that's the world we live in. I mean, it really is 24 hours. And we are, at the time we go on the air at 4:50 a.m., the only live broadcast with actual local news and information, not just chewing on a talk show or taking phone calls. And we thought that was important to give people a couple of minutes warning on what was going on in the world when they jump in the car. We're the first chance they have to hear what happened overnight and what's going to happen in Boston. It's definitely a public radio product, but I'll say as well that it's different than public radio. Most people who listen to it say, boy, that sounds different than NPR. There seem to be a couple of waves. The people who watch it live, and we see them when they're in there, and we talk to them, and that's cool. We say good morning. They let us know what the weather's like or how bad their traffic was or something funny that was said in the studio. But then hours later, people are still waking up. You know, it's live at 4:50, but you can still watch it at 9 or 10 or, you know, the content is the same. The temperature might change, but you see these waves through the day of people kind of...
That's true, but Joe will actually have his phone out while we're there on air, replying to and reading aloud the comments that are coming in, which people love and sometimes probably sounds really strange to anyone else listening in, but we make it quick and we like to acknowledge someone who's up and listening and chiming in.
We have huge plans for our first anniversary here. When's our anniversary?
January 22nd.
So it's almost here. We're going to try to up the ante a little bit. I think people who watch this every day on Facebook Live or listen to it on the radio will hear a lot of the same topics. You know, we're part of our job is to give people survival information to start their day and pack them off with a smile. But particularly when it comes to social media and talking on Facebook Live, people I think will see different environments, different camera angles, maybe a couple of different people, because it's basically one big experiment. And we have no plans to stop experimenting. We'd like to bring early edition on the road a little bit more in the second year. It would dovetail with something that we're doing on morning edition, which is leaving the newsroom, getting out of the studio more, and doing some field reporting. And of course, where we go, early edition goes. And so that'll be the case. We had our first test run in Washington, D.C., and we did early edition from NPR headquarters. We went to Washington to cover the swearing in of Ayanna Pressley into Congress, the first African-American woman to ever represent Massachusetts in Congress. There are a lot of different examples of stories you can cover, local stories that you end up covering outside of Boston. Every story has a Boston angle.